We got another great speaker up next. Our next presenter, he is an entrepreneur and an angel investor who's been location independent, working remotely since back in 2008. At the age of 24, he actually moved from the US to the UK and founded the electronic cigarette company e-cig. He bootstrapped that business initially just out of the back of his rental car using a fake British accent. We saw Noah doing that as well. And grew the enterprise into Europe's largest e-cig brand over the course of the next 4 years. And in 2013, e-cig was acquired by L'Oreal Tobacco for $100 million and rebranded into Blue Cig. You guys have probably heard of that. And after this windfall was his new journey into the investment that led him to the start of the Invest Like a Boss podcast. He's visited more than 100 countries in the last decade while living off of passive income and pursuing his bucket list, which you can find online. He continues to work in startups. He's currently the founder and CEO of coworker.com. And as an investor, his portfolio includes 400 self-storage units in Hong Kong, a micro-brewery in Australia, rental condos across Thailand, and several alternative assets and early-stage angel investments. Join me with your silent hands as we welcome Sam Marks to the stage. Sam, thank you for being here. How you going?
Way too long, Ben. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Blake. I'm glad this has got somewhat of an informal approach. I'm in a hotel in Deadwood, South Dakota, and they're actually doing construction, of course, in the room right next to me. So they put me down in this isolated meeting room downstairs.
Well, as long as your computer works and you got Wi-Fi, we're good to go.
Yeah, cool.
Take control.
Sounds good. Noah, that was awesome. Actually, when some of the profile shots of Noah reminded me of Dwayne Johnson a little bit. I love that he was living in Thailand. We'll definitely have some things in common there. Cool, guys. So Ben, Blake, anyone on the panel, feel free to interrupt at any point if you just want to jump in and keep it informal and ask questions. But what I wanted to dive into is a little bit just in the investing. So for anyone listening, I am not a financial advisor. I'm someone actually that was really fed up with financial advisors and really just trying to figure out how to do it myself. So talk a little bit about my portfolio and how that's evolved over the last 5 years. Talk a little bit about the power of compounding interest. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about that, but actually when you see it illustrated, it's pretty powerful. And then for those that are kind of new to investing, I want to talk a little bit about making your first investment. And where I want to start is just talking about myself along with my co-host Johnny. So Johnny and I actually met in Thailand about 5 years ago, and we've taken a different path in life into financial success. So I was always kind of the hyper entrepreneur trying to swing for the fences and hit a home run and do it quick, where Johnny did it the practical way. So Johnny is much more living cheaply overseas, taking advantage of location arbitrage, very disciplined investing and savings. And over time, he has developed lots of small income streams that are now accumulating. But he's done it in a really, really practical approach, which I think is really inspiring. So when we met in Thailand in 2015, we're both like, hey, I just sold my business. And as an entrepreneur, a lot of you guys out there know, your income is anything but reliable or stable. It's ultra inconsistent. And after we sold the business, I was like, shit, I might not ever make money again. So I got to figure out how to live off what I have. And Johnny was in that path where he was making money, saving money, had no idea how to invest it. And we're like, you know what? Maybe the best way to figure this out is not listen to podcasts and not read books, but actually talk to the smartest people that have done it before, and then apply those learnings by applying our own money and investing our own money to learn by application. So that's what we set out to do in 2015, starting Invest Like a Boss. And each week after interviewing people, we would inevitably end up making investments in different things, dipping our toes in. So I want to talk to you real quick about what the financial dream is, right? And I think a lot of us have heard somewhere along the lines that probably the financial dream is to make enough passive income to be able to support our lifestyle. And that's great, but if you're only doing that, you're still actually living paycheck to paycheck in a sense, right? So I think we have to really dial it up a level further, where financial dream is not only to be able to create enough passive income to be able to live the lifestyle you want, but to also have your money invested in a way that it can appreciate over time and improve and increase your net wealth. Now that's cool because then you're supporting your lifestyle passively. But if something comes up cool, like Elon Musk goes to the moon and we want to buy that ticket, well, maybe we have enough extra to do so. So I wanted to look a little bit just at where my portfolio was post-exit. So 2013, we sold a business. I was basically financially illiterate. I'd never really made investments before. And what do most people do when they come into money? Maybe they come into inheritance, or they sell a business, or they get a bonus at work. What do you do with your money? Well, a lot of people don't know what to do with their money, or they just go knock on the door at a local bank. And in my case, it's exactly what I did. I went to UBS, I went to Morgan Stanley. I got a bunch of financial jargon, a bunch of manipulated numbers, guys in suits that look really spiffy. I said, hey, you know what? Here, take the keys. I trust you guys. You do your thing. All right. And what happened? Well, over the course of 2013 to 2016, the stock market went up. It was up about 30% during that time. And I kept looking at my balance every couple months, and my balance was the same. I kept asking questions, and finally I got fed up with it, and I started reading some books. First book I read was by actually Tony Robbins, Money Master of the Game. Fantastic book. And then I went back and started asking smarter questions. And I realized that the people that were managing my money weren't that much smarter than me after reading one book. And because I had given them the keys and trusted my financial interest to them, well, they actually made a lot of mistakes. They got in the wrong funds. They bought energy and sold it at the bottom, which is one of the worst mistakes you can make. And over the course of 3 years, instead of my account going up 30%, it was flat. And I got fed up and said, time to do this ourselves. So that's about the time I met Johnny in Thailand. And we decided, let's figure out how to invest money ourselves. So I want to fast forward real quick to how my portfolio has changed since 2015 to basically the end of 2019. And what it looks like now is it's 42 different investments. I'm not saying I'm an advocate of that. That's just where it ended up. It's a bit stretched for me. And of those 42 investments, 72 pay out a dividend or interest. I'm averaging about 5.6% yield on that. And 69% of these investments can appreciate in value. Now, some of them can't, like a bank CD that's fixed interest. You're going to get interest, but your principal can't go up in value. And then what I think is actually really cool about this portfolio is there's something that's called accredited and non-accredited investors. And for those of you that aren't aware, accredited investor is sort of a qualification that you can get when you reach a certain income level. I believe it's $250,000 a year, or a net wealth of over $1 million. And when you're an accredited investor, you have access to different types of investments that non-accredited investors don't have access to. And I think there's a big misconception that accredited investors have all the picks that they want. They can get any type of investments that non-accredited investors can't. And while that is true, you'll be surprised how many great investments out there are available for non-accredited investors. And in my portfolio, 32 of the 38 are actually available for non-accredited investors. And that means that pretty much anybody, whether accredited or non-accredited, if they wanted to, they could replicate this portfolio for the most part. So just a quick analysis of some of the investments that I'm currently in. My biggest holdings are stocks and bond funds, followed by annuities. These are pretty boring, but think of them as basically a bank CD. So it's a bank CD, but it just goes through an insurance policy, insurance company, and it pays out a fixed percent interest, something low, like 2 or 3%. And then followed up by the next biggest holding, which is real estate. A lot of that is commercial real estate, as Ben had mentioned, in Hong Kong. There's also condos in Thailand and some residential properties in the USA. And then you have all types of alternative investments, which are sort of for fun, but you of course have some cryptocurrencies in there, precious metals, Forex trading, peer-to-peer lending, mortgage servicing, REITs, all different types of things that we've sort of explored over the last few years. Just one more thing on why I do things a little bit differently or a little bit more complicated, but the annuities are really for wealth preservation. So they're creditor protected. So some of you guys might be familiar with O.J. Simpson. One of the reasons O.J. Simpson still has money, even though he's been getting sued, for the last, whatever, 20 years, is because his monies are in annuities, and annuities, at least in the state of Florida and many other states in USA, are creditor protected. They're also tax deferred, so they grow tax deferred until you decide to take money out of them. And the other thing I have in my portfolio is municipal bonds, which I really like because they're tax-free. And of course, hey, we all like tax-free stuff, right? The last part of it that I do that I guess a lot of people would be necessarily more untraditional would be startup investments. So the reason I do startup investments, not because I think that it's a get rich quick scheme or because it's the most productive thing you can do with your investments, but it helps you stay relevant, right? So when you're investing some of these startup companies, you of course have to learn about that industry, you have to learn about that company, you hopefully add value to that investment through your knowledge and resources. Also, a lot of these companies are located around the world. Some of these are in Barcelona, Singapore, Australia, Thailand. So when I travel to these places, I'm actually able to take a taxable write-off. And one other reason that I really enjoy investing in these is because it is actually a lottery ticket in your pocket. You know, some of these companies will go bust. I've had investments that have gone bust, but some of these could go 50, 100, 500, 1000x. And that's kind of exciting every time you go to sleep thinking about that. So all that aside, what would happen if you went to Warren Buffett and said, hey, Warren, hey, how about some investing advice, right? Well, Warren would turn around to you and say, as he's done over the course of his life, hey, just stick 90% of your money in the S&P 500, keep 10% in short-term treasuries, get back to work, right? Why get back to work? Because your primary income source is your easiest one to build upon. But why the 10% in US treasuries? Well, it's not because US treasuries is a way to get rich over time, but it's an emergency fund. So we just had this massive COVID crisis, which we're getting out of. The Dow Jones went down from almost 29,000 to 18,000. If you took your investments out of the S&P 500 at that time, that's the fatal mistake that you can't make that so many people do. So why keep money in treasuries? It's because it is an emergency fund, so that if you get laid off and you need to come up with cash to survive during this period, pull the money out of treasuries and you don't pull it out of your investments. Okay, so that's Warren Buffett, but what does Albert Einstein have to say, right? Smartest guy ever? Arguably the smartest guy ever. Well, Albert Einstein quoted that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, who doesn't pays it. Credit card debt, stuff like that. That's extremely powerful that Albert Einstein said that, right? So, I mean, there must be something there if he's saying that. So I just want to read a little bit about compounding interest. Most of us are familiar with this term, but it's worth just repeating how it works. So when you keep money invested in an asset like dividend paying stock, you get paid out on the principal passively and at a regular frequency. When these earnings are added up to your original principal balance over multiple cycles, the interest starts to compound. Not only are you getting interest on your initial investment, but you're getting interest on top of the interest. Over the course of time, this creates an exponential snowball effect. Pretty exciting stuff. So we broke down some numbers, and this is really interesting, right? So if you invest $5,000 into, say, an S&P 500 fund, we'll just use that as our investment vehicle, you're getting 7%. It's going to take you 40 years to compound that to become $1 million. But if you just go another 9 years out to 49 years, you'll get 2 million. So you can really see how the time variable is super important to investing in compound interest. 40 years to make the first million, but just 9 years to make the next million. But what if you had 75 years, right? We'll get to that in a second, because I know 75 years is long. If you had 75 years at 7%, $5,000 a year, you're going to have $12 million. Now, if you could get 9% instead of 7%, that's $38 million. But what's the most remarkable about that number is that actually, if you invested $5,000 over 75 years, each year over 75 years, how much does that add up to? $375,000 that becomes 38 million. And this is why Albert Einstein was so excited about compounding interest. But I know what everyone's thinking, and it's what I'm thinking, and it's exactly why I didn't start investing earlier. Well, you know what? I don't have 75 years to invest. I want money now. And peak spending is between age 44 and 48. That's when we want money to be spending. And disciplined investing is difficult. So for this to work, you got to be disciplined. You got to stick to it. And it's tough. It's really tough. So here's the trick. It's all about accelerating timetables. No one has 75 years to invest. Yeah, it's nice maybe to invest for 75 years and leave it as inheritance to our kids. I wish my parents had done that. Wish my grandparents had done that. Didn't happen. So we want to do it for ourselves. So we got to accelerate timetables, right? How do we accelerate timetables? The first thing is got to get started early. You can't put it off for another year or 2 years. You got to get started right away. This is almost my favorite one, number 2, location arbitrage. It's probably one that is most available now than any other time because of remote work. You make money in one place that you can get a good paycheck or online. You live in a cheap place. Noah was talking about living in Thailand. I spend 6 months a year in Thailand. My co-host for Invest Like a Boss is living in Sri Lanka, literally off $600 a month. So there's all these wonderful places in the world that we can now live really cheap while still making a good paycheck from our company or through working online. Also, you can maximize employer match 401ks. This is literally free money. If you're working for a company, your employer offers it, take advantage of it. It's literally free money. If you're self-employed, you can set up, in the US, it's a SEP or a self-employed 401k. If you're not in the US, your government most likely will have something that emulates this type of structure. Again, it can amplify your tax-free savings. And then of course, 7% is not cool. 9% is better, 10% is better. Over the course of 2013 to 2020, the S&P was up 13%. You can get 10% historically in the market, and no one knows what the future holds, but I think the ways the world is going, we'll be able to get that. Talk more about that in a second. But the last thing that's most important, you got to supercharge your earnings. Entrepreneurship, side hustles, real estate investments. And here's one that most people just don't think about that much. Employee stock options. So a lot of people out there are working for small companies, maybe startups. Get yourself some stock options. I have lots of friends that have made, in the range of $50,000 on up to several millions of dollars just through employee stock options. You're working for a small company, maybe you're taking a pay cut to help that company get along. Ask for some stock options. So this is my co-host, Johnny. And what I really like about Johnny, I have to be honest, is he is living, breathing proof that this works. It's not all mumbo jumbo. The math is there and he's doing it. So when Johnny and I started the podcast, his net wealth was about $200,000. And he started on this where he was building his online revenue channels. He was living overseas. He was living in Ukraine, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Bali, really inexpensive places. He was living for less than $1,000. He is now making about $100,000. He's taken advantage of what is called foreign earned income tax exclusion, which in the US means if you make $100,000 or less and you live outside the US, you don't have to pay any tax on that. So he's making $100,000, he's not paying any tax, and he's living off $600 a month. So he's literally saving almost all of his money and he's investing it. But here's a couple other tips. You gotta pay yourself first. Simply what this means is when you get a paycheck, pay yourself first, put it in savings. Don't spend that and then try to save what's left. So if you get paid $2,000, take $200 and automatically invest that, then go spend the rest. Make it automatic. If you have to push a button at the end of each month to save and invest money, you're setting yourself up for failure, I'm telling you right now. Make it automatic, set it up so it's automatically pulling from your account each month. You don't have to think about it. And if you're investing in index funds and really any other type of investments, you got to keep the fees close to zero. We recommend Vanguard. All their ETFs and funds carry a management fee of basically less than 10 basis points now. It's extremely inexpensive. Of course, you want to make this stuff tax-free. Again, in the US, it's called a Roth IRA. In other countries, you'll have something similar for retirement savings. And again, foreign earned income tax exclusion is a way in the US you can get $100,000 of earned income tax-free each year. Then a couple other ones is you want to reinvest the earnings and the dividends straight back into the investment. Don't hold that in cash. When the S&P 500 pays you out a dividend each month, have that automatically invest and buy more shares. And then don't give into inflationary lifestyles. It happens to all of us. We make more money, we spend more money. If you can avoid that, you're going to get to your early retirement a lot quicker. And of course, the last one is don't make that big mistake. I did this in 2008. I had about $30,000 saved up from hustling in high school, working odd jobs and golf courses and bussing tables and everything else. I was in college, the market dropped. I sold and lost about 40% of my savings. I just didn't have any intelligence about the market or market cycles. Don't make that mistake. So this is a really easy way to kind of understand how money works for you. So your money doubles at 7%, it'll double every 10 years. At 8%, 9 years. At 9%, it's going to double every 8 years. At 10%, your money doubles every 7 years. Now, this is the funny thing. I spent 5 years trying to understand all different types of aspects of investing and creating this crazy complicated investment portfolio of 42 different investments. But if I just listened to Warren Buffett's advice, go into the S&P 500, I would be way, way up. Now, I'm not saying the S&P 500 is the best investment or the only investment you need, but it's definitely not a bad place to start. And over the course of since 2013 to 2020, it's been up 13% a year. So 13% a year, your money doubles in just 5.3 years. So I'm advocating here, we've got COVID going on. There's no better time to be thinking about owning your future. You know, I know the webinar at this event that Flippa has been putting on is, the planning for this was pre-COVID, but it's extremely timely now. There's been so many people that have been laid off. People are uncertain about the future. Now, all these things have been being talked about in this program so far. It's so true. You got to take advantage. You got to take control of your future. You can do that by investing in yourself and investing for your future. So I'd be a big advocate. If anyone's not out there investing, think about getting started today. Biggest thing is keep it simple. You want to understand what you're investing in. Probably the easiest way to get started is just investing in an index fund. So what I recommend getting started with is either VT, which is Vanguard's total stock market index. It's the total world. So it's 8,000 stocks from all around the world. You can also do VTI, which is just, it's primarily a US-based ETF. It's 3,600 stocks from around the US. But keep in mind with that, there's still international stocks. It's Microsoft, it's McDonald's, it's Starbucks. So they're very much internationally exposed. So just because you're going into a US stock index doesn't mean that you don't have international exposure. If you want to get a little bit tricky and have some fun and add a couple more funds, you don't need to, but I would recommend tilting towards small cap stocks with VBR. And by doing so, historically, you'll get a little bit better performance. Again, we don't know what the future holds, but historically, a tilt towards small cap has proved to be better than just large cap. And also tech. I'm a big fan of tech. I think tech will continue to outperform in the years to come. And you can get access to that via VGT, which is Vanguard's technology index. So one good thing with our investment philosophy, actually, it's quite interesting when we step back and look at it. Johnny and I are both very much remote guys. We like being location independent. So when we make investments now, we really think about, can I do this basically with no responsibility, no management? Of course, we want diversification. So diversification is basically key to taking out the volatility of your investments. And we want to do things location independent. We don't want to have to necessarily be in one place to manage investments. And of course, we want a mix of growth and income so we can chase that financial dream of having enough income to live our lifestyle, but have enough growth that over time, even though we're living our lifestyle, our net wealth can grow. And the great thing with an index fund is that it really checks all these boxes. So Johnny was kind enough to allow me to show this. This is his dashboard in Vanguard. You can see it's just 3 funds. It's VBR, which is the small cap index fund. It's VTI, which is a total US stock market. And it's VXUS, which is an international index. He's been averaging 7.6% since he got started a few years ago. And this is a very simple portfolio. 3 funds. You could do 1 fund, you could do 2 funds. But if you're just getting started, you don't need to do more than 3 funds. So I'll leave you guys with this, and this is probably the most important point to drive home. This is exactly why the rich get richer even when they don't try. So for someone to go from $1 to $1 million in net wealth, it can take you an entire lifetime, all of your labor, all of your savings, all of your disciplined investing. It can take you an entire lifetime. But for someone that has $10 million in net wealth, to make that same million can be just 1 year of sitting back on the couch eating potato chips and being invested in a passive index fund. 10 million plus 10% equals 11 million. So you got to get started early. Now is the time. Own your future is a great slogan that Flippa put on for this event. Investing in your financial future is one aspect. And of course, all the other things that all the other guests are talking about are extremely important as well. I would implore you, if you're not investing, take it seriously. Feel free to shoot me emails, and I'll stand by for some questions. On this frame, we also have some book recommendations. This one's really good, Simple Path to Wealth. I mean, this one actually is basically 280 pages just saying all you need in your life is one index fund. I'm not necessarily a total advocate of that, but it makes a very good point there. And on Invest Like a Boss, we have 150 episodes. We've had Blake on, and we've had James Alter, who's also on the panel here on the show, and a lot of other great guests that help you learn how to do it yourself.
Amazing. That's really, it's really great stuff, Sam. And I love it because I think there's such a swing towards these risky investments these days. People on Reddit's Wall Street bets, things like that. And people are just trying to make $1 million off of $10 within a week. So it's interesting to see how much money you can make by actually being a traditional investor and just being smart with your money.
Yeah.
On that, one of the more interesting questions I think we got here is super simple, from Kimberly, excuse me. She's just saying she started stocks for her underage boys, which I'm sure is a super common thing. People trying to save some money for their kids, for college, for their life. Do you have any advice on, is it the same funds or something different if you're looking at, starting investing for a 5-year-old, or what would you look at?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So actually, depending on where she is, you can start Roth IRAs for an infant. You have to get that money attributed as earned income. So you can't just start a Roth IRA and say, here, I'm just going to give my kid $5,000 to fund it. But there's all different types of ways to make them, earned income, right? So my sister has a kid, and what I say is they have a business. Take some photos of my niece, make that niece a model for your business, put it on an advertisement, pay them $4,000 for their work, and then put that money into a Roth IRA. If you start, say, with a 5-year-old, you start a Roth IRA, which is basically tax-free retirement savings. It grows tax-free, you pull it out tax-free once they're retired. If you can get $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 in that fund in the years to come, there's almost no way that doesn't become a lot of money. I'm talking over $1 million by the time that kid's of retirement age. So again, I would keep it simple, go into a couple, maybe 1 or 2 index funds, add to it every year if you can. And there's basically 3 things that drive the market higher over time. There's capitalism, there's growing population, and there's labor becoming increasingly efficient, internet, tractors, etc. As long as those 3 things continue, the stock market inevitably is going to go higher unless there's some cataclysmic event. Population is set to grow to 2050. I think capitalism probably will be around, and the internet is making things maybe too efficient in the world. So, I think the stock market goes higher in the next 20, 40 years without a doubt. And if you start investing now, you're going to do well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we actually went through a bit of a cataclysmic event earlier this year, yet 2 months later, the stock market seems to be back. And
I hope you were buying in the dip then.
Yeah. I wish I was buying more, but anybody who saw that coming has done quite well.
Yeah, right.
And that's where the get rich quick comes from. Well, thank you. We're unfortunately out of time. There are a few good questions here, so I will bug you behind the scenes, and hopefully we can get some more information from you down the line. But thank you so much for sharing, Sam. That was fantastic.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.